Glad to be here. Hello from wherever you're joining all across the world. Thank you for sharing with us of your time. We'll be sharing today around this kind of product management in Africa, looking at 2026. By way of introduction, my name is Nkem, and I run the PLA, which is known as Product Leadership Accelerator. This is an African initiative supporting product management excellence on the continent. We also work with product leaders, we work with teams, organizations, just to make sure that we provide them the upskilling, if I should use that word, that they need, and importantly, embedding product management thinking as a strategic capability, not just a delivery function. Okay, I'll hand it over to Seyifunmi, then Roger and Martin to introduce themselves.
All right. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Seyifunmi Olafioye. I currently work as a senior product manager at Seedfi, and I'm also the creator of the Product Notebook newsletter, which is a newsletter for product people to improve their thinking with a little over 1,000 readers. I love products. I have been working in the product space and in product adjacent roles for a little over 6 years now. So yeah, just a little bit about me. Glad to be here.
Great. Hi, my name's Roger Norton. Got about 15 years experience in building products. I'm a 3-time founder, and I've worked with 2 different venture builders, worked with about 80 different early stage teams across Africa. I'm currently Chief Product Officer at OK Hi, where we do address verification, and we help banks and fintechs verify where their customers live.
Thank you.
Great. My name is Martin Ndlovu, and I'm the head of product at Gabeya. My experience in product management is actually very short. In fact, I only started last year to build products thanks to AI and vibe coding and all of the new tools that were accessible. However, in that short space, I built a product called Jitume, which is used by more than 78,000 service providers across 18 African countries, and continues to grow going forward. Now, Jitume is a product that sits under Gabeya, and Gabeya is famously known in the past for connecting tech talent to organizations that need their skills across the world. But as you guys know, AI has definitely changed that business. And so we have pivoted now to building AI agents for small businesses in Africa, starting with service providers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Martin. So just some general guidance on how this session today is going to flow. We basically have 60 minutes, an hour. General discussions will take a bulk of it, where we're going to talk around the state of product management, in Africa for 2026. I would ask, you the questions, and if Martin is okay, if you want to double click or stretch on maybe what somebody has answered, but you're not under any compulsion to. If you don't feel like responding or adding, but if you want to, let's just feel free. After that, we're going to have a Q&A session in the comments, where we'll basically read out questions from our viewers and would answer as much as we can. Okay, so guys, as we all know, early in the year is a time where people do lots of reflection. But today we're going to be doing more than reflection. We're going to be forecasting as we look at what 2026 hopefully would look like from a product management perspective. And this discussion is very timely for me, because I'm currently running a research project around the state of product management in Africa from 2025, and we've basically been discussing with product leaders in Africa across small business, startups, enterprise, NGOs, and even government, and the early signals of what we're seeing is basically challenging assumptions. Interestingly, I think in a week's time or thereabouts, the general polls again would come out for everybody to basically answer. And I say this because in my years working for major tech companies covering the Africa region, at that time when I started, looking back, it looked like the mission was basically bridging the digital divide, getting people online, building for access. But years down the line, and even looking at this research work that I'm doing right now, it seems today that this divide has shifted. It's no longer about, access. It's more about product integrity. So that in 2026, the question for an African PM isn't, can we build it? As we've clearly proven that we can build it. The question is, can it hold the weight of the customer's business? Not just I built a pretty storefront, but the guardrails to help the customer get to where they want to. So for those listening to us today and hearing the introductions from our panelists, you can clearly see that these are people who are not just shipping features, but they are architecting the trust layers, if I should use that word, on the continent, and we'll be getting hopefully great feedback from them. So my first question goes to Roger and Seyifunmi. You can imagine with me that in mature markets, like we see in the West, a product manager can assume that the foundation or the rails are already laid. If you are building a fintech app in the UK, for example, you don't worry if the user has an address. You don't worry if there's a verifiable or a certain credit score to which you give the person a certain amount of money or not, right? And again, tied to my research, we're basically now seeing that validation in 2026, is a little bit different. So Seyifunmi, what do you think is the surgical mistake that product managers are still making in 2026 when they're trying to validate products for the informal sector?
All right, so thank you for that question. In my experience building for the informal sector, one thing I've seen happen time and time again is the fact that PMs, product teams, and product managers do not validate obvious assumptions. So if you are building a product in, let's say, the lending space, for example, the first thing that you are assuming is that somebody has a bank account, and this person has a bank account, meaning the person also has some form of mobile phone or whatever the case. And then you find out that, that doesn't always happen. And product market fit is very, very important. And it is not independent of infrastructure market fit. So as much as you are building for and validating the product viability, you are also trying to make sure that the infrastructure in which this product would be built on is also as reliable and as little as data access is a thing. So yes, we've come to the time where people have access to mobile phones, but do they have access to data? That is something to think about. And in building products like that is when you see the need for building for offline access now. So you are building a tool for a business to manage their operations, as well as, aside from the tech being all well and dandy, you also have to make sure that offline access exists so that they can access this tech that you've built or these beautiful products, regardless of whatever infrastructure and data infrastructure is existing in that environment. And even as little as something as OTPs, for example, in most established countries, they send OTPs to your emails, but then that runs on the assumption that every person uses a mobile phone that has like a screen touch type situation. But some people use, the very little phones here in Africa. We call them like the little mobile phones where the only mobile access you truly have is to your phone number. So a mistake, like I said earlier, is not validating the obvious assumptions, as opposed to what happens here in mature markets and how that works. But one thing I do always advise is that you need to validate, the very little assumptions, as little as poor internet connectivity, validating the offline flows first to say that, okay, in informal markets where the opportunities and the data exposure and access is not as pronounced, you are also building for those people. And a lot of infrastructure in the informal sector is never, linear. You also have to understand their needs well enough to know that, okay, in a lending space, for example, your competitor in the informal sector may not necessarily be, a mobile app. It could be the local money lender or the middleman that already has like a 10-year relationship with, the traders. So these are things that you always have to take into consideration when you are building. Is the market itself ready, right? The users want it, yes. Can the system support it? And the behavior reality is also as important. Will the real world constraints actually break, this offering that you are, bringing to the market? So yeah, that's just a summary on that.
Thanks, Seyifunmi. So Roger,
Yeah.
if I should ask, how has your validation process for OK High evolved now that we aren't just copying Western address models? Roger, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, that might help. Yeah, certainly there's a lot of addressing is one of those things that looks really simple until you dig into it and realize that there's a 1,000 possible variations. And the thing that we found is the same as like taking models from the first world and trying to apply them and where they generally break. And in order to correct for that, what you need to lean on is like the fundamental principles. And so for us, what's the two things that are really critical in any kind of validation process is one, getting incredibly close to the customers on a very regular basis, and two, focusing on value creation and value delivery. And so with those two lenses, it allows you to compensate for the local nuances, for the context of your users actually operating within that. We're constantly shipping prototypes into users' hands, watching them use it, watching it fail. And there's some really great tools for that, using Figma to click up basically working coded prototypes from a single design files, and having users use that, watching them use it, watching it where they get stuck, and being in the market with them actually engaging with your product is one of the clearest signals on how to work out what those nuances are and make sure that you're avoiding the trap of trying to copy first world markets. So there's a number of nuances, but there is plenty of ways that you can leverage technology or leverage advanced technology in order to overcome that. We've recently launched a feature like addressing in a form is such a formal structured thing, but most people don't have a street name or a street number. And so we've actually changed that to an open text box and are now using AI to segment the input, do multiple lookups, cross-referencing, mapping, and then suggesting what a formal address might be from a very informal one, and inferring things like leveraging GPS points and images of front gates in combination with the text address in order to be able to find any location anywhere. So it's by deeply understanding the context that the users are struggling with and how they're trying to overcome it, it makes it a lot more obvious on how to contextualize it for a local context or nuance.
No, thanks, Roger. That sounds interesting. And when you mention context, you're not just talking about one thing, it's the multiple things that are around it. Like you mentioned, you're even trying to figure out what the color of the gate of the person, right, where he stays, because that may be different from the other person. And, we need to make sure that the information is unique. That's great. Martin, my next question, so in framing it this way, looking at my previous roles, working with companies like HP, we both, were Microsoft. We basically saw technology cycles come and go. So with technology cycles, for example, I mean, from dial-up modem to fiber optic, from everything as a server to software as a service. Excuse me. Or the recent, app for everything. You see people, they're building, everything needs an app. It has to go through an app. Then we came to AI, and now in 2026, it seems like the AI hype has settled into, AI as a utility. And we know that when we look at Africa as well, many people can build, but a few can scale profitably. And in a market like ours where, data is often missing or broken, do you think that AI is helping us find the shortcuts to the trust or fragmentation issues that we have?
Thanks for the question, Nkem. I think I want to start actually with the infrastructure question because it could lead to this. I think recently that we've had a lot of frustration in the team because of the lack of infrastructure that's available to us to achieve our outcomes, our goals. One example is the one that Seyifunmi actually raised with regards to OTP, something very, very simple. You know, if you're building in the West, you know that every single person who's probably going to be a user is going to have an email address. For 2-3 months, we tried with email. And our target audience being your everyday service providers, hairdressers, mechanics, coaches, those kind of people, even if they do have an email address on their Android phone, they don't even remember the password and they never go and check their inbox. So we had to build our own OTP system that leverages WhatsApp. And because in Ethiopia, they don't even use WhatsApp, we had to use Telegram. So we're building our own infrastructure just to get people authenticated on our platform. And then comes the very big one. You know, we always talk about how M-Pesa is so great and how we've innovated mobile money. Wow, these things are, you know, leaps and bounds ahead of. But the problem is, we now have to figure out new business models that are going to work for us using those one-off payment systems. With M-Pesa, each time your user is making a payment, they have to put in their PIN. Unlike Stripe, for example, you put in your card and you forget, right? All of that is just not possible. And so we have to like find new ways and innovate around how we can actually charge. Now think about it. We're now building AI agents. This is the kind of like the place where we're going to, and this is to your second question. We're moving away from there's an app for everything, to having an assistant that's intelligent enough to perform actions on your behalf. And this is going to be sort of like an always-on service. And typically something like this you charge a weekly or monthly kind of offering. But it's sad to say that even today, because of our habits and culture on the continent of, especially for smaller businesses who are trying to keep the lights on, you know, trying to pay small bits for each and every service that they get, we have to again figure out how the business model is going to settle in here. I'm very confident because now with AI, especially as Roger mentioned, the way we're able to iterate on those ideas is much quicker than ever before. And I'm also happy to say that we tested out having an AI agent just chat and talk to our customers. And out of the 78,000, more than 18,000 are talking to the AI agent regularly. In fact, some kids are even asking the AI agent to help them with homework. That's how much they started to trust this agent. So I really think that AI is going to solve the trust thing, but more importantly, it's going to solve the education gap.
Guys using practical AI to fix unit economics, if at all.
All right. So just a bit of background, Seedfi is a lending company, a lending and data company. And one of the very key things that you struggle with as a lender is, you know, fraud. You struggle with fraud. You struggle with collating data points that are not necessarily complete, and you know, a bunch of other things like that. And how we think about it in Seedfi here is, how can we first of all automate the processes that are manual today? How can we make the best of these processes so that we can make decisions faster and then move to the era where, you know, AI agents are something, you know, we can relatively rely on. And one of the things I would say that I have noticed, however, is that the presence of AI in itself has helped us be more intentional about our data infrastructure. So prior to now, data, yes, was very, very important, but people did not see the need to have structured data pipelines, to have quality data that these agents or these AI can actually implement properly. And it's been very revolutionary, I would say, now that we can now depend on these data structures, think more intentionally about this data and say, okay, how best can we leverage this for automation, for AI agents? We are currently experimenting with some of those things today, which has helped our bottom line very greatly, if I do say so myself. So we are looking at how we can leverage that for risk scoring, which is a very, very important part, so that we do not give to the wrong people. How we use AI as well to estimate repayments, to say that, okay, this person most likely is a bad actor versus this person is a good actor. But On a general note, I would say that AI has helped us in Seedify, and I think in general, think more intentionally about the data we are collecting from these people. Is the data that is updated? Is it correct? Is it really necessary for the outcome in which we want to, achieve, right? And then I feel like they are, is limitless at this point, or maybe not limitless, but there's so many possibilities in which what we can use for AI, especially in the learning space here. And we have been able to automate a lot of our processes, which has, cut a significant amount of our costs. But we also have to be careful too, because there's hallucinations, there's putting guardrails in place, because you can't just expose all of this data. Some of them are very sensitive data at the end of the day to this AI. So we've been able to work with it more intentionally, to use it as a guide more than it's just doing its own thing, or putting guardrails in place to make sure it optimizes our bottom line, helps our customers in the way it is meant to, and just to have an overall positive outlook on what the future would be and what we can achieve truly with AI.
Nice. No, thanks. Thanks, Seyifunmi. I like when you said, if I do say so myself, you do say so yourself. So I'm sure the AI you guys have built, is good enough. Roger, this is for you. How practical is AI, within your organization or your environment?
Sorry,
Roger
was
hear
that it?
us?
Yeah. Yes, I can. Sorry, slight delay there. Yeah, so we use AI a lot, and I think it's worth separating the use of AI into using AI to help build the software, and then an actual AI product that runs every time a feature runs. And I think often we talk about AI efficiency driving both of those. We're seeing a ton of improvement in the generation of the code and the things we can build, the rate we can build. We're finding mixed results in the leveraging AI, specifically generative AI, in the actual implication of things, because your costs are your unit economics. If you build a SaaS product, to run those API calls is effectively free. If you replace the SaaS product with an agent, now every time you run it, you're spending tokens. So there's a real cost, unit economics cost, every time the user hits that button, every time they run that service. And so we're being much more careful around how we expect our margins are incredibly tight through just in the markets and the models we need to deliver. And so we're being far more cautious around leveraging AI or deploying AI for basic functionality. If we can deliver it with a SaaS at a zero marginal cost, that would always be preferable. And so we're being much more intentional about when and where we plug the AI bots into the service that we deliver. But internally in the team, we're leaning in all in, and we're using it as much as possible and speeding up how we deliver. So I think the use of AI and the cost implications of that is very, very disparate.
Thanks, Roger. And if I can just stay with you, Roger, what structural barriers for your organization today? What structural barriers are you productizing your way around? And I ask this question because for us at the Product Leadership Accelerator, I see PMs who are brilliant at their craft, but sometimes, most often than not, shipping products in the dark due to regulatory hurdles, data costs, broken fail safes. You're basically building that for a broken infrastructure, just like Seyifunmi mentioned. What barriers, do you see within your organization, and how you guys, are working around them? And I'll add maybe even a second question. When if you could fix one ecosystem gap to unlock, 2026, would it be a code problem? Would it be a regulation problem? Would it be a competency problem?
Yeah, so I think, look, internally okay, hi, I'm very lucky. My CEO was a senior product manager at Google, invented the Chromecast, and has done quite a lot of things. So the environment which I operate is very different to the African norm, and a lot of the product communities that I work in and sort of connect in and add value. The common problem that I see is the environments that they're operating in are not product centric. They're not a lot of the companies or the startups have a very traditional business mindset, and across Africa it's very prevalent in thinking about a more traditional business being at a ogre-driven design of a big chief making the decisions at the top instead of it bubbling up or having product discovery and the insights coming from the team. And so I think like the business culture across Africa is still behind where the first world markets are, and we have a lot of great product practices and how product can deliver value by focusing on these principles and iterating and creating more customer-centric value delivery. But often the product managers I see are struggling to actually deliver that or operate in that way when the expectations from the senior management are different. So my dream for the larger organization or the larger ecosystem, and what I'm trying to spend a lot of time actually through mentorship and through a potential course I'm building to fix the mindset of the organization or empower the product managers to be more focused on showing and delivering value than on the principles, because that's what's going to shift an organization, that changes the environment and how you can do product. I think it's more I'm a big believer in product the way, not product the thing, and that if you focus on how the team communicates, collaborates, and makes decisions, we can focus on the environment of how the practices are occurring, you're more likely to build many great things. So as a wider ecosystem, that would be is to be able to show enough cases of product-led organizations delivering outsized value, to be able to shift the mindset of normal business leaders to be able to lean into these principles and actually empower product managers and have these empowered product teams to be able to deliver, instead of the more traditional, much more structured, formal, top-down approach that just can't innovate or move nearly as quickly. So in the large ecosystem, that's what it is for OK Hi. I mean, we've grown exponentially in the last year. We're hoping to have another growth. The biggest problem we sell to banks is just the speed at which they can get the product live. The sales cycle is really long. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be for banks to integrate an SDK in faster than 18 months. But yeah, that's very specific for our use case.
No, thanks a lot. Martin, you want to take a stab at the question? And please, before you answer, I'd like to mention to our listeners, if you have any questions, general questions or questions you want to push to Seyifunmi, Martins, or Roger, please feel free to drop it on the comment section, and we'll try and take as much as we can. Martin, you want to take a stab at the same question? What are the structural barriers that you guys are productizing your way around?
Yeah, so I want to touch on two things. The first thing is how we're noticing that when it comes to actually building really great solutions, you have to focus on two things, which is you have to build the right thing and build that thing right. Now, the second part, which is build the thing right, is coming together. I think we have much smaller teams that are leveraging AI to really come up with great code, and it's really not that issue anymore. Where we're starting to see a need to grow, especially across our product teams, is building the right thing. So I love that Roger mentioned, kind of like the feedback loops that need to be in place, listening to the customer, because you can easily ship 20 to 40 features a day if you wanted to now, but none of that really matters if that's not something that's going to be used, right? In fact, it might actually hinder your customers or users' ability to get value from your product. Now, having said that, things have changed. Like, I've only been in product for 1 year, and in that 1 year, things have changed so drastically. I worry for people who've been in this business for more than 10 years. Like, I struggle to understand, because now finding product market fit is not a once-off thing. We're constantly trying to get product market fit because we're constantly chasing. The interesting statistic that came out last year was that Kenya, it was at the top of the usage of ChatGPT, right? So you've gone from people who were used to kind of waiting for an outcome from your app or your solution to people who want it instantly now, like this. And so you can't just give them something that they have to sit and wait and add their data and eventually get something out. You have to give them results really quickly, or else they leave your product. So we've really had to study user behavior. We've had to understand kind of what are the short-term outcomes we can deliver, what are the medium-term, and then the long-term outcomes. But hopefully people are still there at the end of the long term to get that value. But I have to tell you, like, if you think you've got product market fit and you're feeling comfortable, you better not be, because next month something else could come out. Your competitors are building faster than ever before. So you have to stay on your toes. And that's something that we've changed, and that's really working for us. Any API that's coming out, we know it the day it's coming out. And we're already trying to figure out how it can plug into our system and add value to our users and customers.
Yes. That's great, Martin. I would ask you this question, Martin, and everybody else can take a stab at it if you want to. If a PM today wants to be a C-suite leader, what is the one skill you think that wasn't on their job description 2 years ago? And I have 3 options here: strategy, unit economics, data sovereignty. What do you think that a forward-looking PM at C-suite level should hold on to?
I'm going to add,
because, like you said, it's changing quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm going to add one to your list that I think is really important. You see, I think PMs have really been more focused on building great features, usability, and to a great extent, user retention. Monetization is king now, like especially if you're in a startup that's trying to grow. If you're a PM, you need to understand business models and how to monetize your users, and how to create value or features that translates to money. Any CEO that sees a PM that knows money is going to have them in the C-suite very quickly.
Roger, do you want to add to it? What do you think?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think I agree that the state of, if you can speak in business terms, the business team are going to put you in the leadership teams. I think maybe just to expand that slightly into value delivery. So the different businesses at different stages are valuing different things. You might be valuing growth, or you might be valuing monetization, or you might be valuing more efficiency, depending on the stage of the business. So it's not necessarily always direct revenue. I mean, understanding revenue is intrinsic in value capture, of understanding what that looks like. But in general, like always focusing on how you deliver value for the business, how the product team delivers value within the organization, and how you're building things that matter to the organization and ultimately to your customer. I see a question in the chat, which I can answer through this as well, is what is PM? And product management is really that. It's delivering value to customers in a way that makes money for the business while understanding the technical constraints. So you're moving constantly between value delivery for the customer, value delivery for the value capture for the business, and then the dev team or the technical team of what you're building and the constraints that has, like how quickly can you build, or how can you build the right thing in order to enable those other two. And that's the fundamental role of a product manager. And I think even more so in this of AI, as Martin said, and we can build 40 features a day. It's around focusing on what is valuable. How do we define value? How do we capture value? And if that is the lens through which you're evaluating every day, every feature, every product, you're going to be doing a lot better.
Thanks, Martin. Seyifunmi, so just again jumping on this question, but let me twist it on its head, because Martin and Roger talk about monetization, value, and when we look at AI, which is like the boss thing of the day, AI agents are now writing documentation. They're even writing basic code. Do you think that the junior PM role is disappearing in 2026? Are we only hiring for technical craft, or should we begin to hire for things like business judgment and maybe even the ability to prompt the AI, in a more interesting way?
Okay. So I would actually like a stab at Roger and Martin's question first, and then sort of
Yes.
enter this one. So I think one of the key things needed as well is the ability to tell a story, right? Tell a very convincing story to your stakeholders, to your users, of value creation, value delivery, and monetization as a whole. Because you find out that in very high up environments, sometimes the story is not as clear. What you want to do, what you want to deliver is clear, but you're not telling the story in a way that gets them on board or gets you the buy-in that you need. So I think being a great storyteller is a great quality to have, in that space. So now speaking to your question about the junior developers, I feel like technical skill right now is very, very important. But what is more important is the ability to define a problem, is the ability to validate whether there is a problem and whether or not AI is the tool to solve it. Because there could be a problem, and it could be that AI may not be the best thing to solve that problem. So I do not think, at any point in time, junior product managers rather are going to go out of, no, not at all. I feel like as long as there's a decision to be made and there's value to be created and delivered, the role of junior product managers as a whole is never going to, go out of trend or never going to phase out. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Seyifunmi. While you were answering that question, some quotes jumped into my mind. The research that we're working on, we basically began to see that the smartphone elite in Africa is saturated. So, for example, to grow in 2026, people say we want to reach the next billion users. We need to reach the next 100 million users. And sometimes these users do not have high-end devices, like, we are opportunity to have. And this is a question for you or anybody who wants to take a stab at it. How do you maintain product integrity when your product doesn't function over USSD or low bandwidth SMS? How do you build high trust on a no trust interface?
So I think the first thing would be to, first of all, know who your users are. It is very possible that your ideal users are, people with this infrastructure in place, people with, access to the right data, right technology, and so on and so forth. So that is why in the validation process, as Roger has said, staying very close to the customer is very important. So that in the scoping of this solution, you are building from scratch to know that, okay, yes, we are building for a subset of our customers that have, data and all of the infrastructure they need, but there's also a segment of customers equally as important that we also need to cater for in the development process. Not, when the product has been fully scoped and fully delivered is when you are then thinking of, this subset of users, but building for these people from scratch, right? And at the end of the day, the integrity of your product, or I want to believe, the most important part is you are delivering value to all of your users here, whether, infrastructure reliant or not. So yeah, that's what I believe.
Okay.
And Nkem, if I can maybe add to that, our product needs to be run on a smartphone. We need background location services, and there's two things that we've done to kind of accommodate for that. So the first is like optimizing for those low end devices. So depending on our customer, between 10 to 20% of end users on transient devices, which is the low end Techno, ITEL, Infinix devices, is $10 to $20 or $20 to $50 Android devices. And that's the one aspect of actually identifying flows, and we have triggers in the app that identify that and actually change the way the app delivers and needs to work in order to optimize for those devices. So being very intentional about servicing the types of devices and the environment that your customers are working on. Things like background location caching and syncing when there is data or when there is battery is critical. It's like a fundamental into how you build and design the product in the first place. The second thing is we're moving into looking at leveraging cell tower triangulation and other services that work around that. But I will say, even those things that we're doing in the short term, what we're seeing, and we're very focused in Nigeria, but there's a massive increase in smartphone penetration. It is growing double digits year on year. It's currently sitting at about 40%. I think it was the last end of last year, it came out at about 40 to 50% penetration. They reckon it's going to get to 70, 80% well before 2030. So in the next 3 to 5 years, majority of devices will be that. And I think that's only going to accelerate as the cost of these devices come down, as the prevalence, the secondhand devices, as people get used to having a smartphone, they're going to want to keep having one. And I think designing for non-smartphone use cases, 5 years time or 5 or 8 years time will be pretty much a non-entity. It's very much, I see that very much as a midterm limitation that you need to design around.
Thanks, Roger. Martin, anything, or do I move to my final question?
No, I think it's all been said. You can move.
Okay, super. So my final question, most of the common headlines that I see, in our tech ecosystem, reads like company X raises, $Y, and, the buzz goes around, everybody is happy, and, we're feeling like a piece of cake. But to me, I feel that's so 2015-ish, a headline. So let me ask you guys, imagine we come together again in a year's time, February 2027. What is the one headline you would want to see that proves African product innovation is now being exported back to the West?
Okay, so first of all, on my side, whether it's exported back to the West or not is not really important to me. What's more important is my continent, Africa, right? If it does get exported, great. But the kind of headline that I do envision or that I want to see is something that really shows impact of technology on the continent. And it would read something like, Africa GDP increases at the same time new technology released. Coincidence? ? And then really now we're starting to say, okay, it's not just people who are raising and startups raising large amounts of money. Some of them go bankrupt, or some of them are still operating, but we don't see any real difference in poverty numbers and stuff like that. I want to know that the stuff we're building as PMs in Africa is actually having an impact on real people on the continent.
Thanks, Martin. Seyifunmi?
So I think for me would be something around Africa, or any of the countries in Africa really takes a significant chunk of the infrastructure market. So I wrote an article a while back about the saying where people say the fintech industry is saturated right now. And I always have a counter argument to that to say some parts of it are, but we are still facing a fundamentally huge gap in infrastructure. A lot of fintech companies right now use foreign infrastructure to run their daily operations, which costs a lot in unit economics, where they have to pay thousands of dollars for some of these solutions, which honestly I wouldn't say we can build it ourselves, but the truth is we can. We are competent enough to build those kind of solutions, to see our solutions going global, really infrastructure wise, because I feel that we know how to build these things. We already have the context is already here, it's already provided. Seeing any headline regarding us, being providers to the West, if at all, that would be great in 2027.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Yeah, I think that's the big thing for me, and I see it more and more, like very much in our product, but I see it more and more in solutions that are coming out, in that because we're solving in such dynamic markets with broken infrastructure, it means that our solutions need to be significantly more resilient. They need to be significantly more dynamic just to be able to survive in our founding markets, in the starting markets. And I think in a world that is starting to go through rapid change, with evolution and things adjusting and things shifting, and markets being like highly fragmented, and even more so as the politics is starting to break apart and there's sort of conglomerates and separation of that, I honestly believe that emerging market technology that has an inherently resilient DNA in how it's been built, in the assumptions that it's made as its founding principles, and how you're solving problems in more innovative, more unconventional ways, not expecting that infrastructure to be there, is going to, in the near future, is going to stand us in really good stead to dominate those fast changing, fast moving markets where companies in those markets that are expecting certain infrastructure or certain things are going to be in place are going to struggle to expand. And it's the resilient technology and the ethos of the African DNA, African startup DNA and product DNA that is really going to put it in the head and really us to actually compete and outcompete a lot of those people in those markets as we go. So I like to see, like, from a very much a startup lens of just more companies expansion, and exactly as Seyifunmi says, is us becoming the infrastructure, the solution providers in those markets, because their current solutions can't adapt as rapidly as their changing environments are going to become.
Thanks a lot, Roger. So in looking at the comment screen, we see people asking how they're going to get the recording. There's going to be the recorded version after this. You can always take a look at it, and also at the Inspire Africa YouTube channel. It's going to be available for you. I see a piece who asks the question: how do you optimize? How do you gather data for AI optimization? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yes, let me take that. All right. So hi, Peace. The first thing to do is to start with the problem, not the AI. It is very possible for there to be an existing problem, but it doesn't necessarily mean AI is the solution to that problem. So the first thing you need to do is to start the problem. What are you trying to, really optimize? Is it something regarding risk? Is it a conversion problem? Is it a research problem? Trying to gather data from your customers, whatever the use case is. And then I think the next thing you need to also worry about is, the data quality more than the data quality more than the quantity of data that you have, because garbage in, garbage out. AI is very reliant on the quality of data that you give it. So start to look inwards after you have validated that yes, AI is the best possible solution or the fastest way to solve this problem. To start thinking of the data points needed. Are you collecting those data points today? Is it a situation where you need to start collecting it, start structuring it differently? Are there pipelines, that are ready to be used for that data? And I think the last part is very important. How would you measure the success of this initiative using AI? So is it a situation of more applications, reviewed? There needs to be a way for you to measure the success so that you know that you are not just using AI, but it is effective for the solution that you are trying to use to solve the problem.
Can I
Thanks
add
a lot,
one?
Seyifunmi.
Yes.
Yes, please, you can.
Please. There's this one that we figured out. Use AI to get data for the AI. This one has worked brilliantly for us. Like service providers, informal service providers, that's some of the hardest data to get on the continent. And we realized that, no, there's no way that we're going to pick up on all the little data points. So what we did is we got the AI agent to speak to them. This part you already know. So whether it's on WhatsApp or Telegram, it's talking to them. But we also got the AI agent to get access to the database and to be able to dynamically create, tables based on the questions that we're asking. And so the AI goes and talks to them, and based on that unstructured response that we're getting, it then organizes the data for us in the tables, so that when we come back and we're looking at that data, or when the AI comes back to look at that data, it finds all of it there. I tell you, this is one big hack that has worked for us.
Yeah, I think definitely
Thanks a lot,
adding telemetry to activities into a log file and throwing an AI to that is definitely something we've used internally as well. Maybe just the unsexy approach, I think, is one mistake that I often see is product teams operating without a proper product analytics in place. So if they're not using a mixed panel or amplitude or something that can do cohort analysis or customer segmentation of the people who click this button or enter this search term, what was the conversion rates, what are the funnel rates, what does that look like downstream, and having that baseline has been really critical for us in when we are rolling out new features or new functionality to analyze actually how people are using that. Too many product teams that I'm working with are trying to get together on Google Analytics or some kind of general analytics tool that doesn't do proper cohort analysis. The difference between a product analysis metrics product analytics tool versus a general one is leaps and bounds. And to really get deep understanding, to get that granular data, you really do need proper telemetry in place. Proper telemetry is good for sort of automated testing, to stump it in a DB. But if for humans to look at it and play with it and build the graphs and explore data, you really need an effective tools. And so Amplitude or Mixpanel or PostHog or Pendo, one of those sort of product focused cohort analysis tools is really critical.
Thank you very much, guys. So we're coming to the close of this session. It's been so insightful listening to you all. I wrote down some comments I'd like to rehash based on what you guys have mentioned. But before that, please, for our viewers and our listeners, if you can give us a few minutes, have some interesting announcements that you'd like to listen to. Okay, so I wrote down there are 4 truths, if I should use that word, that I basically picked up from what you guys said when we look at product management in Africa as we move through 2026. First one was technology changes fast, but strategy is basically what survives. I think it's important for we as product managers always to think about, the customer, think about, what their problem is and how our solution will meet it, regardless of, AI and all the tools that are coming. Our strategy is very important. And I think, secondly, the most successful product managers in 2026 aren't just the ones who build clever apps, but your product basically has integrity. So I would say that your product integrity is as strong as the foundational problems that you solve. 3, I think the era of growth at all costs probably is over. Martin, I know that you're basically you're a growth lead. Growth is important, but I think that to lead in 2026, product managers have to master the economics of their product. So I think that if you don't own the unit profitability, you don't own your roadmap, right? So while growth is good, look at the unit profitability. And finally, AI. AI in Africa, I don't think is so much about chatbots. I think AI in Africa is about efficiency. So as you build AI into your solution today, AI should not just be a feature that is filled into the list of things you have on your app or your platform, but it should be a margin builder for where you are. Those are my summaries of what you guys talked about. And now to the announcements. So the Inspire Africa conference is coming back to Lagos, Nigeria in October this year. This is the premier product management conference, on the region. Product tour, the Africa product tour is also happening next week. We're going to be in Lagos, in Nairobi, and in Cape Town, and I'm going to see you all. Please feel free to come say hello. And I think there's a link on the screen for you to also register. And finally, the second cohort of the Product Leadership Accelerator is going to start by the end of April, May, and applications are going to be open hopefully in a week or 2. So please watch out for it. Follow us on our social media handles and please apply. So I want to say thank you all to the panelists. Can I get like one sentence, last words from each of you based on how you think 2026 is going to go from a product perspective in Africa? Who wants to start?
Sorry, shall I start? I think it's too hard to say how it's going to change. I think just the fact that it will change. And maybe to touch base on that last question of how things are changing, what should you be focused on acquiring? It's really about staying curious. And I think that for me is the theme. The theme for me this year is, how do I stay curious? How do I keep learning the new tools? How do I keep expanding? How do I keep finding new ways of delivering value to customers? So curiosity is the theme for me in my product role and what we're looking for this year.
Thank you very much, Roger.
Yeah, I'll come in there. I think for me, products in 2026 are going to be so dynamic in Africa. I think for the very first time, we're going to start to see smaller startups being able to cater for much larger groups. And I think the biggest problem we've had on the continent, having 54 countries speaking so many different languages, so many different cultures, is that finally we're going to be able to keep up with all the differences across these borders and be able to build products that truly transcend the continent.
Thanks, Martin. Seyifunmi?
Yes. So for me, I would say that 2026 is a year of so many changes, as rightly highlighted, but it is very important you do not lose sight of the problem that you are solving, because this problem is not static and it continues to evolve, as well as the tools and the industry in itself is evolving. So yes, make sure that continuous discovery is something that is a continuous process that happens from time to time, so you do not lose sight of the problem that you're solving for your customers and for the business as a whole.
Thank you very much, Seyifunmi. So guys, listeners, everybody on the panel, thank you very much for your time. We're going to bring this session to a close, and hopefully we'll catch up somehow. Enjoy 2026. Bye.